on North Korea, on Russia, on other policies between the president and the Secretary of State. That's been a long-standing thing. We've always known about that. So that is just why today, why this week. That's sort of the piece that we're still trying to pick together right now.
Zeke, the reports seem to suggest that the president made this decision late last week. Is that your understanding, or was it something just in the last couple of hours? And on the flip side, when can you tell us, if you can at all, when Secretary Tillerson would have been notified?
We've been told that this was set in motion on Friday when the president spoke to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State, of course, was in Africa at the time. He was overseas. This was by phone, we were told. And then the Secretary of State took Saturday off, citing illness. That's the timeline that we know, that we've been told right now, is that the timeline that will be true in 72 hours with this White House. Sometimes that's not always the case. So I just want to add that important caveat that that's sort of what the party line is at the moment, is that this happened on this was set in motion on Friday while the Secretary of State was overseas.
So what's interesting about that, Zeke, and the reason I wanted a little bit of clarity on that timeline, is if the President of the United States decided to oust Tillerson on Friday, it is interesting that in the last couple of hours, because the Secretary is traveling, so I'm using the term couple of hours because he's in a different time zone, he's come out and suggested very strongly that Russia is involved in that case, that very troubling case that we've seen in the United Kingdom with those ex-spies who have been poisoned. And so that's kind of interesting, where you had Sarah Sanders. I think you were in the briefing room yesterday. In fact, I saw you in the briefing room yesterday. And when Sarah Sanders was asked this question about Russia and about the poisoning, and she seemed to sort of dodge that question and wouldn't name Vladimir Putin or the Kremlin explicitly in her comments. So it's kind of interesting that Tillerson, knowing that he was on his way out, made sure that he at least went on the record with what he believes happened in the UK.
Exactly. It was a really interesting contrast in messages that, it was sort of eye-opening, sort of surprising last night, our time, when we saw the Secretary of State make those comments. And now sort of seems to make a little bit more sense in hindsight, where Sarah Sanders yesterday, when I asked her over and again, so you're saying Russia did this or not? Is Russia's not behind this? Basically saying it's too soon to tell. We support our British allies in their investigation. When the British government was emphatic that it was that Russia was somehow behind that poisoning with that nerve agent of a former Russian spy, and then the Secretary of State come around saying there are going to be repercussions, and it's obviously Russia. The information doesn't change that quickly. Actually, when the White House wouldn't back up Tillerson last night after he said that. So there's certainly been tensions there between the White House and the State Department, between the President and the Secretary of State on issues like this. And that's sort of just a microcosm in the last 24 hours of what those tensions are like.
So, Zeke, Mike Pompeo, the expectation is that he, as Secretary of State, will be more in line with the Trump administration's policies?
That's it sort of seems to be the case. He certainly has a better relationship directly with the president. He's forged that. He's often in the presidential daily brief between when the president gets read in every morning on the nation's deepest secrets, and that has given him sort of a level of proximity and familiarity with the president that a lot of other members of the administration, of the cabinet, don't even have, because he's there, several times a week, sometimes every day of a week if he's not traveling overseas. We're told. So he has that personal relationship, and so ideologically, and that's really been the biggest shift between Tillerson and Trump. It's been a lot was made early on about how they're successful business people may see eye to eye, but in fact, they never developed a really warm personal relationship. Trump and Pompeo have that already, and Pompeo has sort of been towing the party line on all of these issues. Will there be breaks between the president and his new Secretary of State, assuming he's confirmed? Certainly, the president is an unconventional politician, unconventional president. There are going to be differences between even Pompeo, sort of a more establishment Republican type. There are going to be differences, but that personal relationship is the sort of thing that White House officials are sort of banking keeps him in that job.
But Zeke, I guess the biggest difference is that the president of the United States refuses to acknowledge that Russia may have been the principal actor in meddling with our elections back in 2016. Director Pompeo is a former member of Congress, a former Republican member of Congress. It just strikes me interesting that the CIA itself has suggested that Russia, in fact, not suggested, has very clearly stated that the Russians meddled in the 2016 election. And I wonder if bringing Pompeo from the CIA to state is perhaps an acknowledgement that even though the director has been on the record as saying that he agrees with his service, he agrees with the intelligence reports coming out of his very own agency, this is a way for the president to exert a little bit more control over that narrative.
I think that's certainly possible there. Tillerson sort of developed a reputation in the administration as a sort of freelancer who was often ahead of the president or steps behind the White House on different issues. They never really got their message in saying their tensions over personnel. Tillerson wanted to bring in more people, wanted to clean shop at the State Department, wanted to dramatically transform the place, and thought he had the president's support in some of those things, but often that didn't pan out. It was really a match that never really worked, and this is an opportunity for the president to sort of hit the reset button by putting someone in there who he has a closer personal relationship with, who sees a little bit more ideologically aligned with him, and is going to sort of make his mission, it seems, sort of follow through and execute the president's foreign policy rather than carry out a transformation of a bureaucracy, which seemed to be Tillerson's big effort.
And he's going to have to hit the ground running because we have, supposedly, this meeting that will happen in May between Kim Jong-un and the president. Mike Pompeo has come out and publicly supported some of the more inflammatory tweets that the president has sent out there about North Korea. You know, he supported the president's tweet about having a button that actually works, and many people found, a little concerning. He supported the fire and fury tweets. It seems like moving forward with this very important meeting, we'll have somebody who is in line with the president. Zeke? Maybe we lost Zeke. Okay, so we know that the president certainly values loyalty almost above anything else. And Mike Pompeo has definitely sort of displayed that level of loyalty. I am curious about Gina Haspel, who'll be taking over for Pompeo, and whether or not that was a Donald Trump pick or whether, Mike Pompeo suggested her.
I mean, she's the deputy director. So
right. It's a natural,
fit.
but we've seen times when sort of the natural person is not often tapped under the Trump administration. He likes different people, right?
Well, the key is both of these individuals are going to have to be, they're going to need confirmation from the Congress.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be an uphill battle. I don't know necessarily. Zeke seems to think that because Pompeo was a former member of Congress, the Republicans are in control of Congress, of both houses of Congress, that he should be confirmed. My guess is that will probably happen, but I don't think it will be easy. I don't think it will be an easy battle.
Because now he has a bit of a track record with the president,
He does have a bit of a track record now with his administration. And it'll be, I'm sure, that even if he is confirmed, you will see Senate Democrats very pointedly asking Director, now Secretary of State Pompeo, or soon to be confirmed Secretary of State Pompeo, where he stands on the actions of Russia during the election, and to get him on the record even more implicitly than they have in other Senate hearings, or in other congressional hearings. And so that will be interesting. At least he may be confirmed, but you're going to see Senate Democrats pushing back on the president's claims that Russia did not interfere in the way that our intelligence agencies suggest that they did.
And I think, what you might also see a pushback on this idea of loyalty and their chumminess. What Zeke described as an asset for at least their relationship, that they seem to have a personal connection. We have seen that this loyalty, a personal connection, this is the sort of thing that the president has pressured other people, other appointees to demonstrate to him, right, in order as a prerequisite of keep their jobs.
Yeah.
And so now, what does that mean? What parameters do you place on loyalty? What are you willing to do? Seeing as you have a pretty good relationship with the president, I think those are the sort of questions you're going to hear from Democrats.
You're absolutely right, and I think look, and it's not what I think; it's actually what is fact. Director Pompeo has a background in. He's a little bit more suited to this job than Rex Tillerson because Rex Tillerson, a lot of people, including the president, when he was campaigning, suggested that he was going to have businessmen surrounding him because they were not beholden to special interests. They were wealthy. They had good business connections, and the president was all about making deals, right? But now, as he, in a year and plus a year and several months into office, realizes that, look, it's not that easy, even if you are a business person, even if you are wealthy. Witness the completely, the interview that the Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, gave to 60 Minutes, where you can just see, just because you're wealthy, just because you may have been successful in one field, doesn't necessarily mean you know how to run a bureaucracy as part of the federal government. Mike Pompeo is a decorated military officer. He was a serving member of Congress, very involved in diplomatic issues. As director of the CIA, he will have a keen understanding, and has had so far, a keen understanding of the threats that face this nation and our allies. And so he may ultimately be better suited as being our chief diplomat, because he has a keen awareness of the issues that are facing this country, whereas Tillerson, and look, he's been on the road, he's been talking to leaders, he's been very upfront about how he feels about North Korea, how he feels about Russia, but you may see that this may be, we may look back on this move by the president and say this is probably a good move. Yeah,
I think, as we sort of dissect Tillerson's tenure here, I mean, you can't help but to see sort of the writing on the wall very, very early on. I talk about this often. I remember being sort of surprised that one of the first things on the agenda was to manage the budget of the State Department, when at the time we had so many things going on. Of course, there was North Korea, but there was Iran. There's so many big things happening in the world, and that seemed like something that wouldn't be at the top of the agenda. But then how many times have we seen, Rex Tillerson say something only to have the president say something completely different in a tweet or off the cuff, in a casual remark to members of the media? And it appeared as if Rex Tillerson, for much of his tenure, was playing catch-up. Right. He was always being undermined by the president. And look, at the end of the day, Rex Tillerson, as a former CEO, this is something we've seen. We've even seen it with President Trump, right? What are the reports out of the White House from Major Garrett and others? The president doesn't like deep, in-depth profiles, reports, briefings. He prefers bullet points. Tillerson was really no different. He didn't want to get into the minutia. He wanted to have the big picture. Even as CEO of a major corporation like Exxon, he would not have been involved in the minutia of running a company like ExxonMobil. He would have been involved in only the very big decisions that need to be made. And so it was very similar as Secretary of State. And that is why you saw all these gaps. And what you're clearly seeing is, I've actually spoken to former ambassadors, former U.S. ambassadors, and they say, look, there is a serious problem underway at the State Department. We do not have the resources that we originally had. And so far, it hasn't been breaking news, but that's only because, Anne-Marie, the reality is we have not yet been tested with a major diplomatic calamity. I mean, we've had little bits and bobs here and there, but the reality is, without these people in place, without a U.S. ambassador in South Korea, without figuring out who the next ambassador, for example, to Mexico is going to be, that puts us at a disadvantage when it comes to our partners. So I'm reading just some information that our Margaret Brennan was able to get from some of her sources. And this just sort of feeds into this conversation about just how organized is this administration. According to Margaret Brennan and her sources, the secretary had not spoken with the president. He found out about this when the public did. So what does that mean, like a half hour ago? He had every intention of staying due to the critical progress in national security, meaning the meeting with North Korea. The state scrambling to put people in position. People in position for that big meeting. So this is interesting because it's sort of, I mean, again, this is, so for our audience just joining us, if you're just joining us here on CBSN, the news, Rex Tillerson has been ousted as Secretary of State, and he is going to be replaced by the CIA Director Mike Pompeo. Now, we had just been speaking to Zeke Miller, and again, everybody is scrambling, making phone calls, trying to figure out how this all happened, how this all went down. Our Margaret Brennan, anchor of Face the Nation, and our foreign affairs correspondent, is saying that the director, who is now going to be the next Secretary of State, including Tillerson, just found out about this. Yeah, this is sort of stunning. Okay, or so maybe Pompeo knew, but Tillerson just found out. We have correspondent Jeff Pegues standing by for us. Maybe you can give us some clarity, Jeff. I mean, this seems like something you'd want to give your Secretary of State a little bit of a heads up on. It shouldn't be something that he finds out